had trained generations of soldiers to survive with nothing but their instincts, their wits, and their will to stay alive. Cold, heat, hunger, exhaustion. None of it mattered when discipline held. But the island I was sent to this time didn't care about discipline. It didn't care about skill, rank, or experience. It just watched. It listened. And then it began hunting. The island was once a nuclear testing ground, a scarred piece of forgotten land far from any shipping route, a place where governments buried their mistakes. I was deployed here alone as part of a classified survival evaluation, meant to simulate the worst-case scenario for special operations candidates. I had minimal gear, a knife, a metal canteen, and a fire starter. Nothing else. No radio, no support, no rescue. But the moment my feet touched the scorched sand, I knew something was wrong. There were tracks, not of animals I recognized. They circled my landing point, as if expecting me, as if something had been waiting. The vegetation was sick, yet thriving, twisted, yet full of life, a contradictory ecosystem born from radiation and decay. Trees bent at unnatural angles, their bark blistered like burned flesh. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying a metallic scent, as if the air itself remembered fire. My mission was simple: move inland, survive for 7 days, and document everything. I'd done worse, but within the first hour, I felt eyes on me. Not the eyes of wolves or feral dogs. Those I could sense, categorize, predict. This was different. This gaze was heavy, intelligent, curious, and it followed. I kept low, moved quickly, conserving energy. I studied the ground the way I always advised my recruits. Look for patterns, asymmetry, broken shapes. And the patterns here were wrong. Twigs snapped in the same direction, as if bent deliberately. Stones placed in small clusters like markers. I found remnants of old military camps, but they were torn apart, not by weather or time, but by force. Something had ripped through tarps, crushed helmets, bent metal frames as if they were made of clay. As dusk fell, the island darkened unnaturally fast. I climbed a ridge, surveying the land, mapping routes to water sources. But in the valley below, between the half-dead trees, shadows moved. Not animals, not wind. They were slow, methodical, too large. They shifted in and out of view, blending with the dying forest, as if the island itself were swallowing them. I made camp briefly, only long enough to test the soil and purify water, but during the night, something crept close. It stayed just beyond the fire's reach, silent at first. Then came the breathing, deep, raspy, almost human, but not quite. My training told me to stay still, conserve heat, conserve movement, but instinct screamed to run. When dawn broke, I found prints surrounding the camp. Not footprints, depressions too wide and too uneven, like something walked on malformed limbs or changed its gait as it moved. They led toward the forest, deeper, always deeper. I forced myself onward. The island grew denser, more hostile. I tracked carcasses of mutated boars, their bodies torn open with surgical precision. Something hunted them, something dissected them, something learned from them. My mind whispered explanations: radiation poisoning, hallucinations, stress, all logical, all convenient. But logic died when I reached the old bunker. It was hidden beneath a collapsed hillside, half buried under rusted steel and burned earth. Official maps showed no structures here, yet the reinforced entrance told another story. Someone had built this in secret. Someone had tried to contain something. Or study it. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with iron and mold. My flashlight flickered across walls lined with claw marks. The scratches weren't desperate attempts to escape. They were testing pressure points, analyzing structure. The markings grew more complex the deeper I went, like something intelligent had been learning how to break free. The final room contained metal restraints torn apart from the inside. A thick alloy that should have withstood immense force now lay twisted and snapped. Beside them, a notebook, pages half dissolved by moisture. What remained were fragmented entries, references to Subject Delta 9, post-mutation cognitive enhancement, behavioral unpredictability, and one phrase repeated again and again: it adapts, faster than expected. I left the bunker with a growing unease gnawing at my discipline. Something had escaped, something that wasn't supposed to exist. And it was still here. As night fell again, the hunt escalated. I moved silently through the brush, but every few minutes I heard it behind me. A faint drag, then stillness. A shift of weight, a low exhale. It mimicked my movements, matching my pace, learning my patterns. I changed direction. It changed direction. I doubled back. It anticipated the maneuver. I was no longer the predator. I had become the lesson. On the fourth night, it finally revealed itself, not in form, but in sound. A cry echoed through the island, a distorted imitation of a human scream, as if stitched together from the memories of voices long dead. It traveled unnaturally far, vibrating in my bones. It wasn't meant to scare me. It was communicating, signaling, or testing what I would do next. I hid in a narrow ravine, covering my scent with mud and radioactive clay. Hours passed. The moon cast sickly light across the ravine's walls. Then, above me, something pressed its weight onto the edge, slowly, deliberately. The silhouette was wrong, too tall, too thin, limbs jointed at angles I couldn't trace. But what terrified me most was the stillness. Predators breathe, they twitch, they adjust. This thing didn't. It waited with the patience of something that had studied humans for a very, very long time. When it finally moved away, I knew I wouldn't survive 7 days. I needed extraction, but had no radio. My only option was to reach the northern cliff, where old signal equipment might still function. But the creature was herding me, leaving trails, breaking branches, always guiding my path. It wanted me to go somewhere. It wanted something from me. By the time I reached the cliffs, exhaustion blurred my senses, but in that moment of weakness, I heard it behind me. Not breathing, not dragging, walking, upright, testing a human posture. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The instincts of every hunt I had ever led screamed at me that turning around meant death. The cliffside radio mast barely worked, but I managed to generate enough static signal for detection. Rescue arrived at dawn, but as the helicopter lifted me off the island, I saw a figure standing on the beach, tall and motionless, watching. Its outline shifted slightly, as if adjusting itself, learning how to appear human, and in the final moment before we ascended into the clouds, the creature raised its hand, not in threat, but in mimicry, copying the gesture of a soldier signaling evacuation. It had watched everything. It had learned everything. And it wasn't done. When I returned to base, the briefing room felt unnaturally small, as if the walls themselves were listening. The officers seated across from me wore the same expression, a mixture of controlled concern and something colder, something calculating. They asked about environmental hazards, radiation levels, hostile wildlife. But none of them asked the real question, the one they were afraid to put into words. What followed you back? I kept my report clinical, concise, omitting the details I knew they would dismiss as stress responses. But even as I spoke, I felt the same heavy gaze I had felt on the island, not from outside, from memory, from the lingering certainty that the creature had not simply watched me, it had memorized me. During the medical decontamination, I noticed patterns in the radiation scanners beeping, not random, almost rhythmic, as if something had briefly interfered with the device's sensor. The technicians assured me it was a common glitch, but I had spent years training soldiers to recognize patterns in chaos. This wasn't chaos. This was intentional. Sleep became a stranger. My nights were short, jagged stretches of half-dreams where I wandered the island again, except the trees were taller, the shadows denser, and the unseen thing moved closer each time. I would wake up with my hands clenched into fists, breathing like I had been running for miles. The scent of metal lingered in the air, toxic, familiar. 3 days after extraction, the first incident occurred. A perimeter alarm triggered at 2.14. Security swept the area and found nothing. No footprints, no broken fence wires, no signs of intrusion. But the external camera feed showed something else. A single frame of distortion, a flicker of shape tall enough to blot out part of the floodlight. The footage corrupted itself within seconds. The next morning, I was called to a private meeting with Colonel Mercer. He locked the door behind him. Unusual for him, a man who treated protocol like scripture. "Your report left out a lot," he said quietly. I didn't answer. His eyes tracked me with the same weight the creature had once done, as though searching for something beneath the surface. "We lost a research team on that island 12 years ago," he continued. "No bodies recovered, only fragments of equipment. And something else, something we never managed to classify." He slid a file across the table. The pages inside were heavily redacted, entire paragraphs blacked out. But the images remained. Twisted metal restraints, claw marks identical to those in the bunker, and blurry photographs of a tall, irregular silhouette emerging from a collapsed testing zone. "This isn't new," I said quietly. "You knew something was there." "We suspected," Mercer corrected, "but nothing ever left the island until now." The word struck me harder than any blast. "What makes you think it followed me?" Mercer tapped a photograph, a zoomed-in still frame from the corrupted security footage. The outline was unmistakable, thin, tall, wrong. But worse was its posture, leaning slightly as if studying the lens, copying the way a human might approach a mirror. My instincts recoiled. It wasn't stalking out of hunger. It wasn't killing out of survival. It was learning. The base went into silent lockdown. No alarms, no announcements. Troops were ordered inside. Patrols doubled. Cameras reinforced. But deep down, I knew barriers were irrelevant. The creature had slipped through structures far more secure than ours. That night, the power flickered. The backup generators activated instantly, but for 3 seconds, the base fell into complete, suffocating darkness. In those 3 seconds, something brushed against the outer wall of my barracks. A faint scrape, metal against something much harder. I froze, listening. The scrape repeated, slower this time, as if dragging a limb across the surface, as if testing material, measuring resistance. When the lights returned, I approached the wall. A single mark cut across the metal plating, a groove too fine to be accidental, but too deep to be made by any tool I knew. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Whatever it was closer than ever. Over the next 24 hours, the base's atmosphere changed. Soldiers whispered in hallways. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Radiation detectors spiked at random intervals. Motion sensors triggered in empty rooms. Drones returned with warped footage. The creature wasn't hiding anymore. It was mapping us. During a late evening inspection, I noticed something wrong near the eastern fence. A section of ground where the grass bent unnaturally, not from footsteps, but from weight distributed across multiple points, like something walking with inconsistent limbs. The pattern stretched toward the forests beyond the base, then back again, stopping a few meters from the fence, as if something had stood there, studying the layout for hours. I realized then that leaving the island had not saved me. It had exposed everything else. That night, Colonel Mercer found me reviewing surveillance tapes, frame by frame. "Whatever this thing is," he said, "we need to contain it before it adapts further." "Contain?" I asked. "You didn't contain it before." He hesitated, his first sign of uncertainty since the operation began. "That's why we need you. You survived it once." I almost laughed. Survived? No. I had been spared. Outside, a siren suddenly blared, but not the perimeter alarm. This one was internal. Something was moving inside the base. The lights dimmed. The siren died mid-tone. A shadow passed across the nearest hallway monitor, a tall, gliding distortion. And for the first time since leaving the island, I felt the same cold pressure between my shoulder blades. It had found me again, and this time it wasn't alone. The first gunshot inside the base echoed like a rupture in reality, sharp, metallic, too sudden for the human mind to register as anything but danger. The sound bounced down the concrete corridors, followed by frantic shouting. Then another shot, this one muffled, as if swallowed by something dense. I sprinted toward the source with Colonel Mercer close behind. The emergency lights flickered overhead, their red glow pulsing like a heartbeat far too slow for a living body. When we reached the eastern corridor, the stench hit us first. Not blood, not decay, but something chemical, like burnt plastic mixed with wet metal. 2 soldiers lay on the ground, their weapons intact, their bodies untouched. No wounds, no signs of struggle, but their eyes were open, staring wide at the ceiling, as if they had seen something in the last seconds of life that their brains couldn't process. Their expressions were frozen in a grotesque blend of shock and fascination. "Neurological failure," Mercer said, kneeling beside one. "This looks like—" "It didn't kill them," I interrupted. "It overwhelmed them." As if hearing us, the hallway lights dimmed again. Not fully, just enough for shadows to crawl along the walls. I felt the same pressure, the same suffocating awareness I had felt on the island, the sense of being evaluated. A speaker crackled above us, distorting through static. But instead of an announcement, something else emerged, a slow, deliberate pattern of clicks. Not mechanical, not electrical, organic, a mimicry of the code soldiers used for silent communication, except this version wasn't human. "It's learning faster than before," I whispered. We moved deeper into the facility. Every step felt heavier, as if the air thickened around us. I kept my hand on the wall, feeling faint vibrations, rhythmic and pulsing, like the creature was moving somewhere inside the infrastructure, its limbs brushing against pipes and cables. In the central operations room, several monitors were frozen on static. Others showed distorted footage. The creature not in full frame, but glimpsed in fragments. A limb too elongated, a torso bending unnaturally low to the ground, then rising upright again, testing posture after posture, as if rehearsing a new shape. The most terrifying detail wasn't what it showed, it was what it didn't. Every footage skipped a split second before the creature turned toward the camera, as though it anticipated surveillance and avoided revealing its face. Or maybe it didn't have a face to reveal. The base's intercom suddenly activated, and a voice echoed through every hall. My voice. "Sector C is secured. Move toward the western entrance." The hair on my arms rose. I hadn't spoken. The creature was replicating me. Tone, cadence, breathing, everything, perfectly. Mercer's jaw tightened. "It's directing our own soldiers. We need to shut down the entire network." Before we could act, a choking metal screech reverberated from somewhere below. The floor trembled, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. Emergency shutters slammed down over several doorways. "It's in the lower labs," Mercer said. "We keep classified equipment down there. If it gets into..." "It's already in," I replied. We descended into the lower levels, narrow, cold, lined with reinforced panels. The deeper we went, the more the air changed, growing colder, denser, as if the creature absorbed heat. The lights here flickered not from electrical failure, but from deliberate interference. Every few steps, we passed cameras ripped open, wires stretched and twisted into shapes resembling diagrams, almost as if the creature was attempting to replicate human schematics. At the bottom of the stairwell, we found the first door breached, not smashed, not forced, unlocked, opened gently, as if someone with complete access had walked through. A low humming filled the hallway. I recognized it instinctively, a frequency generator used for radiation experiments. But the tone was wrong, shifting unpredictably, like a voice trying to imitate the machine's song. Inside the lab, equipment lay disassembled with surgical precision, panels removed, wires sorted, components arranged in complex patterns across the floor. Patterns that looked disturbingly similar to the ones I found on the island, except now they were more refined, more intentional. Something moved behind the generators. Mercer raised his weapon. "Show yourself." The humming stopped. Silence expanded like a living thing. Then, from the shadows, something stepped into partial view. Just one limb, thin and impossibly long, ending in a hand that wasn't a hand. Its surface reflected the red emergency lights like polished bone. The limb bent at wrong angles, reshaping itself in slow, rippling motions, as if trying to match human anatomy, but unable to decide on the correct form. Mercer steadied his aim. I grabbed his arm. "Don't shoot. If we don't, it'll kill us." "No. It wants us alive. It could have killed me a dozen times." The creature's limb retracted slowly, disappearing into the dark. But the air didn't ease. The pressure built, shifting behind us. Then came the voice. Not mine. Mercer's, perfectly replicated. Behind you." He spun around instinctively, firing into the darkness. The recoil echoed down the hall, but the darkness swallowed the bullets. A cold realization struck me. It wasn't trying to kill us. It was trying to make us kill each other. "What does it want?" Mercer yelled. I stared into the void ahead. The same void that had watched me on the island. And as the shadows shifted, as metal groaned and warm breath seemed to brush the back of my neck, I understood something horrifying. It wasn't following me because I escaped. It was following me because I taught survival. And now it was learning not just how to hunt, but how to outlive us. The corridor behind us groaned, the metal structure flexing under a weight that didn't match footsteps. It was heavier, distributed, like something using more than two limbs to brace itself against the walls. Mercer switched to a tactical flashlight and swept the beam across the ceiling, but the shadows bent unnaturally, absorbing the light rather than retreating from it. The air shifted with a wet, almost organic warmth, and for a moment, I could swear something exhaled above us. "We need to move," I whispered. But the hallway ahead stretched into darkness so complete it felt liquid. The emergency lights along the walls flickered, not randomly, but rhythmically, like a pulse. A pattern, the same pattern I'd heard in the creature's mimicked clicks earlier. It was communicating, not with us, with itself, or others. Mercer tried his radio, static. Then something else layered beneath the static, our own voices again, but fractured, layered atop each other as if the creature was playing back every word it had collected. Then a third voice joined, one neither of us recognized, a low, almost gurgling whisper. "Stay." Mercer stiffened. "Did you hear?" "Yes," I said. "Keep moving." We advanced down the corridor, keeping our backs to opposite walls. The darkness shifted ahead as if something large had just withdrawn. My instincts screamed ambush, but the creature wasn't ambushing us. It was herding us again, guiding us toward a specific point in the facility, just as it had guided me across the island. It wanted something. We reached Lab Sector E, one of the most classified sections of the compound. The door was already open, the security lock melted into a warped mass. Inside, the laboratory was in disarray, but not randomly. Equipment was arranged in spirals, a geometry eerily reminiscent of natural patterns. Seashell spirals, cyclone rotations, cellular divisions, as if it were studying the fundamental shapes of life. "What was kept here?" I asked. Mercer hesitated. "Prototype biological adaptive systems, regenerative tech, classified work on environmental mutation stabilization. In other words," I said quietly, "exactly the kind of research something like this would need." A soft tapping echoed from the room's far corner, slow, deliberate, like fingers testing the metal floor. Then the tapping shifted into a pattern, identical to the emergency code soldiers used during blackout scenarios. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. 1 tap. Mercer's eyes widened. "That's a distress call." "No," I said, stepping slowly back. "It's a lure." A shape unfolded from the far wall, not stepping out, but uncoiling, as if its limbs had been pressed flat against the surface, blending with the shadows. It was larger now, much larger. The torso stretched and contracted in subtle pulses, as if it were breathing for the first time in a new form. The limbs were straighter, more human-like, though still wrong in ways my mind rejected, bending at joints that didn't belong. The creature stood upright, a crude imitation of a man. Mercer lifted his rifle, but I shoved it down. "It wants you to shoot," I whispered. "Why?" I swallowed. "So it can watch how we react." The creature tilted its head with slow curiosity, the motion too smooth, too fluid. Something in the shape of its upper body shimmered, not visually, but in the way heat distorts the air. I realized with growing horror that it wasn't just mimicking human posture now. It was copying breath rhythm, heartbeat cadence, micro movements of balance. It was copying us. And then it took a step. The floor shook under the impact, but the step itself was silent, perfectly controlled. It raised one of its elongated arms, and for the first time, I saw something like a hand at the end, not fingers, but growing approximations of fingers, branching, splitting, then retracting, as if the creature were testing which version worked best. Mercer took a step back. The creature mirrored him exactly. Same angle, same timing. "It's learning to anticipate intention," I said. At the far end of the lab, the generator flickered. The creature's head snapped toward it instantly, and in that moment, something changed in the air. A vibration, low, resonant, wrong. The creature was signaling. Another vibration answered from somewhere deeper in the facility. Mercer's face went pale. "There's more?" "No," I whispered, cold dread climbing my spine. "Not more, not yet. But it's preparing a form that could multiply." The creature turned back toward us and lowered itself slightly, almost like a bow. And then it began to mimic a motion so precisely human, it made my stomach turn. It raised its hand and pressed it slowly to its chest. A salute, a distorted, imperfect soldier's salute. Mercer's voice broke. "It's mocking us." "No," I said. "It thinks this is how to communicate. It thinks this is trust." The light suddenly went out. The darkness swallowed everything. In that moment, something brushed past me, not hostile, but curious, tracing the edge of my gear with deliberate precision. A cold, bone-like limb rested against my shoulder, feeling the shape of it, testing weight distribution. Then, a scream. Mercer's. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of terror. I swung the flashlight wildly. The beam flickered on just long enough for me to see Mercer pinned against the ceiling, limbs of the creature wrapped around him with chilling tenderness, holding him like a specimen. His mouth trembled, eyes wide, but he couldn't move. The creature turned its head toward me. Not to threaten, to show me, to demonstrate what it had learned and what it could do next. For a moment, that stretched far beyond reason. The creature simply held Mercer aloft, suspended against the ceiling like a specimen pinned inside a display case. His arms trembled, his breath shallow and ragged, but he was alive. The creature wasn't crushing him. It was examining him, studying every involuntary reaction buried inside his survival instincts. I aimed my flashlight upward, the beam trembling. The creature shifted, its limbs recoiling slightly from the light, as if processing the new sensory input. It didn't fear the brightness. It analyzed it. I could almost feel the calculation behind its stillness, a cold intelligence measuring every variable in the room. Angles, weight, threat, motion. "Let him go," I said quietly, though my voice sounded foreign, even to me. The creature responded, not with Mercer's voice, not with mine, but with a sound halfway between a breath and a low, resonant hum. It vibrated through the lab equipment, rattling the metal panels in a slow, pulsing pattern, communication, not aggression. Then, with unsettling gentleness, it lowered Mercer back to the ground. His knees buckled and he collapsed, gasping, his skin pale and drenched with cold sweat. He scrambled away from the creature, but it didn't move toward him. Instead, it turned toward the far wall, where cables and wires hung exposed from the melted security panel. With a fluid motion, it slid toward the cables and began manipulating them with its branching fingers, splitting and merging tendrils as though testing conductivity. Sparks flared. The room's lights flickered in synchrony with its movements. Every time a connection was made, the creature paused, as if waiting for a response from the system, as if expecting it. "Stop it," Mercer whispered. "If it gains control of the entire base—" "It already has," I said. The creature suddenly stiffened, its body elongating slightly, as though something had clicked into place. Then it released the cables and stepped back. The lights across the entire lab stabilized. Every screen powered on simultaneously. Then the security feed changed. Every monitor switched to the same camera view, the entrance gate of the base. A single soldier stood there, alone, rifle lowered, staring directly into the camera. He wasn't part of the base's personnel. His uniform was wrong, the pattern outdated, the insignia missing. Mercer squinted. "Who the hell is that?" I stepped closer to the monitors. The soldier wasn't breathing, not even the faint rise and fall of chest movement. But he wasn't dead. He was too still, too deliberate. Then he took one step forward, stiff, mechanical, like a puppet pulled by invisible wires. My blood ran cold. "It's not him," I whispered. "It's mimicking." The creature inside the lab emitted a low, clicking tone. The soldier on the screen mirrored the movement exactly, a tilt of the head, a shift in posture. It was puppeteering an imitation of a human through the cameras. Or worse, testing a new form outside. The soldier on the monitor slowly raised his hand, bending the wrist at an unnatural angle, as if the creature hadn't perfected the motion yet. Then it lowered the hand and walked out of frame. Mercer staggered to his feet. "We need reinforcements." "There's no time," I said. "If that thing is outside in a new shape, it's already learning how to move among us." The creature in the lab shifted again. This time, it turned toward us with an eerie stillness, as if listening to something beyond the walls. Something distant, something calling it. The humming began once more, deeper, more resonant. The very structure around us vibrated, and then, somewhere far above, alarms across the base erupted in a simultaneous wail. Mercer grabbed my arm. "We have to get topside." But the creature moved before we could. It slid toward the exit with blinding speed, not attacking, not blocking, simply positioning itself as if guiding us out. It wanted us to follow, or it wanted us to see. We rushed up the stairwell, the alarms growing louder. At the top, we burst into the main corridor. Soldiers ran in every direction, disorganized, panicked. Emergency shutters slammed shut behind us seconds after we cleared them. Then came a scream from outside. We sprinted toward the entrance, emerging into the freezing night air. Floodlights flickered overhead. Soldiers formed a perimeter, rifles shaking in their hands. Beyond the fence, near the tree line, stood the silhouette from the camera feed. The copied soldier, but now closer, now clearer, and now moving in a disturbingly fluid rhythm, its joints shifting under the skin like machinery struggling to fit inside organic casing. A second silhouette emerged from the trees, then a third, each one imperfectly human, each one learning. Mercer lifted his rifle with trembling hands. "They're multiplying." "No," I said slowly, dread curdling in my stomach. "They're practicing." The creature from the lab suddenly appeared behind us, its presence so silent, not a single soldier reacted until the air shifted. It didn't attack. Instead, it stood between us and the growing crowd of mimic soldiers, its body rising taller, limbs extending, spine arching like a creature caught between evolution and experimentation. And then it did something that horrified me more than anything on the island. It pointed at me. A deliberate gesture, a command, not to come closer, not to stay back, but to watch. The mimic soldiers at the tree line shifted in unison, their heads tilting in perfect synchronization. Then they stepped back into the shadows, retreating, not in fear, in strategy. The main creature lowered its arm. Its body contracted, folding in on itself, reshaping with sickening precision. And as it dissolved back into the darkness of the base interior, one message became unmistakably clear. It had finished learning. Now it was beginning, and whatever came next, whatever strategy it prepared, whatever future shape it intended to take, it wanted me to witness it. It wanted me to understand, because this wasn't the end of the hunt. It was only phase one. The perimeter lights trembled as though the ground beneath the base exhaled, releasing a long, cold breath that washed over every soldier present. Men shifted uneasily, their grips tightening on rifles that suddenly seemed useless. Mercer was pale, still shaking from what the creature had done to him, but he forced himself forward, barking orders that were swallowed by the oppressive silence settling over the compound. I stood still, my pulse hammering in my ears, knowing that whatever semblance of control the base once had was now an illusion. The mimic soldiers had vanished into the forest, but their absence was worse than their presence. They had moved with a purpose, a plan. The original creature had directed them like a commander, issuing instructions, and we had no idea what those instructions were, or how long until they were carried out. Inside the base, alarms flickered uncertainly, some failing entirely. The power grid groaned. Systems that had been stable for decades began to shut down one by one, as though an invisible force threaded through the wires, plucking and severing them with surgical grace. I felt a dread so cold it numbed my fingertips. "They're inside the network," I said. Mercer caught the edge of the doorway to steady himself. "You mean controlling it?" "No, not just controlling it." I swallowed hard, studying it, learning it, the same way it learned us. A low tremor rolled through the ground, subtle but impossible to ignore. The soldiers froze, the air filled with dust shaken loose from unseen vibrations. Somewhere deep within the facility, a heavy door slammed open, then another and another, the sounds cascading like dominoes falling. Mercer looked at me with a hopeless expression. "It's unlocking sections of the base. But why? What's it looking for?" Before I could answer, the emergency PA system crackled alive with a familiar static. We all turned upward instinctively as the speakers throughout the compound hissed, then steadied. A voice emerged. My voice. "Evacuate Sector A," the system ordered with perfect inflection. "Repeat, evacuate Sector A, immediately." Soldiers hesitated, confused. The tone was authoritative, calm, identical to the commands I gave during training exercises. Some began to move toward Sector A out of instinct, out of trust. "Stop!" I shouted instantly. "That's not me. Nobody moves unless they see my face." My heart pounded as I realized what the creature was doing. It wasn't just mimicking sounds. It wasn't just testing motions. It was exploiting trust. The base descended into fractured chaos as squads halted in doorways. Unsure of whether to obey or disobey, Mercer slammed his fist into the wall in frustration. "This thing is going to dismantle us without ever firing a shot." "No," I said. "It's going to reshape us." We pushed toward the central hub where the command servers were located. If we could shut down the network manually, we might limit the creature's reach. The hallway outside the hub was disturbingly quiet. Not a single soldier guarded it. The door stood ajar. Inside, the server room lights flickered in waves, casting long, trembling shadows that crawled across the ceiling. Rows of machines hummed steadily, their indicators blinking in erratic patterns. But the true horror waited at the center of the room. A silhouette stood among the servers. Not quite human, not quite creature, something in between. It turned toward us with slow curiosity. The shape had refined itself since the last encounter. Its torso was broader, more proportionally correct. Its limbs, though still too long, no longer shifted uncontrollably. It had learned to mimic musculature, posture, gait. But its face was still unfinished. A smooth, pale surface like wet clay, rippling faintly as though testing which features to build first. For a long moment, it simply watched us. Mercer raised his rifle but didn't fire. Some primal instinct told him, told all of us, that shooting would only accelerate whatever adaptation it was attempting next. The creature moved with unsettling precision, each step calculated, each shift of weight eerily familiar. Then it tilted its head and reached toward its blank face with one elongated hand. Slowly, deliberately, it pressed its fingers into the shifting surface. And the face began to change. Contours emerged, cheekbones, a jawline, the bridge of a nose. It was copying someone. Mercer choked out a whisper. "No, no, no." The creature's face smoothed into place. My face, perfectly replicated. Even the scar above my brow, even the faint tension around the eyes. It stood there as my mirror image. Taller, more elongated, wrong in structure, but unmistakably me. A grotesque reflection sculpted in real time. Every muscle in my body turned to ice. It spoke. "You survive." The voice was mine, down to the smallest breath. But the cadence was off by a fraction, like an echo trailing too close to the original. Mercer stepped back. "It's choosing you." "No," I whispered. "It's replacing me." The creature tilted its head again, studying my expression with eerie patience. Then its limbs contracted, the mimicry intensifying. It wasn't satisfied with the face. It wanted everything, every reaction, every micro-expression, every reflex. It was perfecting the role. And then it did something that froze my blood. It reached toward me slowly, gently, as if inviting me to step closer. Not to kill me, not to attack, to learn the final pieces, to finish becoming me. The servers around us flickered violently. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The moment felt stretched to the breaking point. The creature waiting for my response, its movement still, its stolen face watching mine. Then, from somewhere deep in the base, an explosion shook the entire compound. The lights died. The servers went dark. The creature's mirrored face flickered in the dying glow, and in that fraction of darkness, it vanished. Not retreated, not fled, vanished, leaving only the cold certainty that somewhere in the base, in the shadows, or among the soldiers, something wearing my face was still learning how to finish what it had started. And I no longer knew if the next time someone called my name, I'd be answering the real voice or the one that wanted to replace me. The explosion that shook the base felt less like an attack and more like the structure itself had finally reached its limit. Dust rained from the ceiling, lights flared and died, and somewhere above us, metal screamed as it twisted under stress it was never designed to withstand. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the echo of the blast rolling back through the corridors like distant thunder. Then came the shouting. I staggered into the hallway with Mercer at my side, both of us half blind from the power fluctuations. Emergency strobes flickered between red and dead black, throwing the world into a disjointed series of frozen images. A soldier sprinting past with blood on his sleeve. Another dragging someone by the collar. A third standing completely still in the middle of the hall, staring at nothing. I grabbed the third by the shoulder. Report. He flinched as if waking up from a trance. His eyes focused on me, then flicked over my shoulder, uncertain, like he was checking to make sure he was talking to the right version of me. Section D, pressure breach. Something tore through the blast doors from the inside. He stammered. We tried to seal it, but the metal, it bent like it was soft. Casualties, he swallowed. We don't know. Half the cameras are dead. Radios keep picking up. Interference. Voices. Mercer steadied himself on the wall. We need manual overrides. If this thing has the network, we cut it out of the system entirely. Back to analog. Back to locks and keys. And if it's not just in the system anymore? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. We moved with the flow of retreating personnel toward the central muster zone, a reinforced hangar designed for full base evacuation procedures. It should have been chaos, but instead, what unsettled me most was the order. People moved in clean lines, too clean, their steps synchronized in ways that felt off, like they were all following a rhythm no one had told me about. Do you see it? I muttered. Mercer scanned the crowd. See what? Pattern, step cadence, watch their timing. We paused near the hangar entrance. Dozens of soldiers passed by, their boots hitting the floor almost simultaneously. Matching pace like a choreographed drill no one had rehearsed. Their faces were blank, tight, aggressively controlled. Some glanced at me and Mercer, some didn't. A young sergeant approached, breathing hard. Sir, evacuation choppers have been scrambled. Command wants key personnel prepped for extraction. Key personnel? Mercer repeated. Who defined that? Orders came from you, sir, the sergeant replied, looking straight at me. I felt the words like a punch. I didn't give that order. The sergeant blinked, thrown off balance for a moment. Then his expression reset into something flat, practiced. Orders had your identifier code, voice authorization, and biometric confirmation. How? Mercer hissed under his breath. I knew how. It hadn't just copied my face or my voice. It had learned my command patterns. Who verified my biometrics? I asked. System did, sir. Of course it did. Mercer leaned closer. We play along, at least for now. If it wants us on those choppers, we find out why. We moved into the hangar. The high ceiling reverberated with engine noise and shouted commands. 3 helicopters waited on the tarmac, rotors turning, blades carving the smoky air. Groups of soldiers lined up, each guided toward a specific bird by glowing markers on hastily set up portable screens. The screens shouldn't have been operational with the network in this state, and yet they were. "That's not our evac protocol," Mercer said. "No," I agreed. "It's more efficient." He shot me a look. "You say that like it's a bad thing. Since when do we let an unknown intelligence optimize our survival procedures?" Before he could respond, a nearby monitor flickered, briefly replacing the loading manifest with a grainy camera feed. For less than a second, I saw my own face staring back at me. Not live. Not quite. A frozen image, expressionless. Wrong. Then it blinked away and was replaced with names and ID numbers again. I stepped closer to the monitor, heart thudding. "Where did that feed come from?" A technician shook his head. "No idea, sir. System's been glitching since the blast. We're trying to keep manual control, but something keeps rerouting priority. We can't even shut some of these down now. They override remote commands." "Cut the power then." "We tried," the tech said. He tapped the base of the unit. "These aren't drawing from the main grid anymore. They're piggybacking off some other internal source." I didn't ask what other source. I already knew. One of the pilots waved to us. "We're ready for liftoff. Command says key personnel on first bird." Mercer hesitated. "I don't like this." "Neither do I said. "But staying here while it rewrites the base isn't an option either. We go. We stay alert. We don't trust any comms that aren't line of sight." As we approached the helicopter, I could feel eyes on me again. Not just the usual attention a senior instructor gets. Something heavier, evaluating. Soldiers in line shifted to get a better look. Some whispered. Others didn't bother hiding their suspicion. The creature had done more than mimic me. It had put doubt in everyone's mind, including mine. We boarded the helicopter. The roar of the rotor blades intensified, drowning out most sounds. I strapped in opposite Mercer. Across from us, 3 soldiers sat rigidly, backs straight, their helmets in their laps. One of them watched me without blinking. As the helicopter lifted off, the base grew smaller beneath us. From above, the damage was clearer. Sections of the compound buckled inward, blast doors gutted, entire structures partially collapsed, as if something had pushed up from beneath them. Lights flickered across the complex in broken grids, like a dying organism still trying to keep its nerve signals firing. I should have felt relief at leaving it behind. I didn't. At about 200 meters up, the pilot's voice crackled over the internal headset channel. "We're clear, setting course for secondary site." "Confirmed destination," Mercer said. "Classified, sir. Command level clearance only. Transmission logged under your authorization." "My what?" Mercer snapped. "I didn't authorize." The pilot didn't answer. His posture stayed rigid, his voice flat. "Course locked. Manual override unavailable." "Pull us back," I said. "That's an order." Still nothing. Slowly, Mercer reached forward and unstrapped himself. He moved toward the cockpit, gripping the side rail to steady himself in the turbulence. "Stay in your seat," I said. "If we're not in control of this flight, we're already dead." He shot back. He disappeared through the narrow passageway toward the front. A moment later, His tense voice came through my headset on a private channel. "You need to see this." I unbuckled and moved forward, bracing myself as the helicopter tilted slightly with an air current. When I reached the cockpit, Mercer pointed at the instrument panel. The navigation screen showed our course as a straight line over open sea, away from any known base or friendly installation. No waypoints. No return vector. "Where are we going?" I asked. The pilot didn't turn. His hand stayed locked on the controls, knuckles white. Sweat beaded along his neck, visible even from behind. "Pilot," Mercer said through clenched teeth, "look at me." The pilot's head turned, fraction by fraction, as if it weighed far more than it should. His eyes met mine. For a moment, they looked normal, frightened, strained, but human. Then something in them changed. Not in color, not in shape, in timing. The blink came half a second too late. The focus shifted a fraction too fast. The muscles around his eyes didn't coordinate with the rest of his face. "Tell me your last order before takeoff," I said slowly. He spoke, but the words came out like a recording. Perfect, flat, too precise. "Last order. Evacuate key personnel to secondary secure site under Priority 1 protocol." Mercer and I exchanged a look. Secondary secure site. I'd been in this world long enough to know what that really meant. Quarantine. The pilot's fingers flexed on the controls, tendons shifting under the skin in an odd, segmented way. "Stand up," I said. "Step away from the controls." His body twitched, then jerked, like two different commands were fighting for dominance in the same nervous system. For a moment, he seemed on the verge of obeying. Then, his jaw locked, teeth grinding audibly. "Cannot comply," he said. "Manual override unavailable." Mercer swore. "We're not talking to him anymore, are we?" I stared at the pilot, at the unnatural tension spreading down his neck like invisible wires pulling him taut. The creature hadn't needed to physically board the helicopter. It had found another way. "We need control of this aircraft now," I said. I reached for the pilot's harness buckle. His hand shot out, faster than it should have moved in such a confined space. His grip clamped around my wrist with crushing force. Cold and rigid, like bone wrapped in too little flesh. For a fraction of a second, the skin along his forearm rippled, as though something beneath it adjusted, correcting a misalignment. It was in him. Whether fully or partially, I didn't know. I didn't want to. Mercer swung the butt of his sidearm hard into the pilot's temple. The impact snapped his head sideways. His grip loosened. We dragged him back, hauling him out of the seat. The helicopter lurched as the controls went unmanned. "Take it," I shouted. Mercer fell into the pilot's chair, grabbing the stick and adjusting the pitch with practiced, if rusty, movements. The helicopter steadied, though the warning lights on the panel blazed red. "Auto-nav's locked in," he grunted. "I can hold us level, but we're fighting the system." I secured the unconscious, or whatever he was now, pilot against the wall and strapped him in. His head lolled, but his eyes stayed open, watching, learning, always learning. I turned back to the cockpit. "Can you get us back to land?" "Maybe. If I can cut the nav from the main..." The panel flickered. For a heartbeat, every gauge dropped to 0. The engine sound stuttered, then resumed. The warning lights changed pattern, and on the navigation screen, our course realigned. Back toward land, not toward the base, toward somewhere else. A small, unidentified island rendered in low-detail topography. Cold realization seeped into my spine like ice. The nuclear test island, The same one I thought I'd left behind. "It wants us to return," I said. Mercer stared at the screen. "Why?" "The base is compromised. The network is compromised. It has access to—" "It's not about the base," I said slowly, "or the systems, or the soldiers." I looked back at the pilot, at the thing inside him trying to hold form. "It's about iteration." The creature had tested containment, tested observation, tested camouflage. Now it was testing something else. Repetition. Refinement. "The island is its ground zero," I whispered. "Its lab. It's not done. It wants to keep developing away from interference, and it wants me there with it." Mercer gripped the controls harder. "I'm not flying us into its nest. It already has control of the systems," I said. "If we fight it here at this altitude and lose, we drop into the ocean with no chance of survival. If we let it take us, we walk back into hell," he finished. For a long moment, only the rotor's steady thrum filled the cabin. The sea below glinted cold and dark in the dim light. The navigation marker crawled steadily toward the island. Finally, Mercer exhaled through his teeth. "We do this on our terms, not its." He cut power to one of the auxiliary systems. The panel dimmed. For a moment, the navigation display flickered uncertainly, like the creature's influence was weakened. "This is still a machine," he said. "We can bleed away its control points one by one, force it to juggle too many things at once. And when it adapts," he shot me a grim smile, "then we do what you trained us to do. We adapt faster." Behind us, the pilot's eyes slid to me again. His lips moved without sound, forming the shape of my name. Not my name as the base called me. My name the way the creature had first learned it on the island. The way it had repeated it, broken and warped in the dark. "Whatever this thing really is," Mercer said quietly, "it picked the wrong man to use as a blueprint." I wasn't so sure, because as the island's outline slowly rose on the horizon, jagged cliffs, twisted trees, the same scarred shoreline, I felt a creeping uncertainty gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. The creature had watched me, studied me, copied me. What if it had done more than that? What if, in all the hours it had lingered just beyond my reach, it had already started rewriting something inside me? Not physically, not obviously. Subtle changes, micro delays, shifts in instinct, patterns in thought. How could I be certain that my decisions were still entirely my own? As the helicopter descended toward the island, engines straining against the fight between human hands and an inhuman will buried in the systems, I looked at my reflection in the cockpit glass. Same face, same scar, same eyes. But there was something in the way the reflection moved a fraction after I did, a lag so small most people would never notice. Most people. I blinked. The reflection blinked perfectly in time. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe not. The skids touched the cracked, irradiated soil of the island with a violent jolt. The engine whined down. The rotors slowed. The pilot's voice spoke again, barely audible, words scraping through a throat that wasn't sure how to shape them. "Round 2. Mercer looked at me. "We could destroy the bird, burn everything, make sure nothing leaves this place again. If we're stuck here, at least it's contained." I stepped out onto the island, the same metallic scent of old fire and rot filling my lungs. The trees still bent at wrong angles. The wind still whispered like it remembered screams. But something was different now. The island didn't feel empty anymore. somewhere in the distance, something moved. Not hunting, not stalking, waiting. I tightened my hands into fists, feeling the weight of every lesson I had ever taught, every survival principle hammered into others now being turned back toward me by something that had no right to understand them. "We're not just containing it," I said quietly. "We're the next phase of its training now." Mercer joined me on the ground. Behind us, the helicopter's systems flickered once, then went still, as if the creature had stepped out of them the moment it no longer needed that body. The wind shifted, carrying a new sound, faint, distant, not a howl, not a roar, a voice, mine, calling my own name from somewhere deeper in the island. Mercer's hand went to his weapon. "Tell me, that's a recording." I didn't answer, because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whether the creature was already wearing my face somewhere inside this place, or whether it was still finishing the last details while I walked toward it, this wasn't over. This was the beginning of a new lesson. For it, for us, for whatever came after. And as we stepped forward into the twisted forest, toward the voice that sounded exactly like me, one thought refused to leave my mind. Out here, on this island, with no observers left but us and the thing we'd helped create, who was really hunting who now? What do you think? Is the man speaking in the end still truly himself? Or is this already the creature's perfect imitation walking back into its own territory?